There seems to be an awful lot of sad stories in the news today, and there are thousands missing. Does anybody care? We built a channel where we talk about those faces. Talking News with Debbie. Kelsey Barnes has still not been found, and it's been 2 years since her case first hit the spotlight. Breaking. Chattanooga and Middle Valley both behind bars. Sarah Galloway was found. She wasn't found alive. What happened to Sarah Galloway?
It's too heartbreaking to share.
Children are still missing. Children like Dorsey. You're in shame. You just got away with it. Welcome to Talking News. Hello everyone. My name is Debbie. We use big stories to push little faces.
Chasing a murder.
Hello everyone, welcome to Chasing a Murder Talking News. Hope you guys are doing absolutely fabulous, guys. I know I haven't had time to kind of get up with you guys and know what's going on. This has been a very challenging year, but it could always be worse, so I'm very thankful it's not. So we are going to do like a Talking News episode, but we're going to kind of cover, starting off with some of the newer stories like Dylan Rounds, then work our way forward, or actually backwards, to some of our older stories like the Kelsey Bears, just kind of do an update. Right now, I'm not at home. I'm actually at my daughter's, so I'm having to record wherever I can. Right now, we have a thunderstorm going through, so you may hear some thunderstorms as one is passing over as we speak. How is everyone doing? I usually have more time to check in with you guys, but I just haven't been able to do it. There's no lack of stories out there for a lot of you who follow the true crime. It's really sad, really, to see how many of and young, innocent people who don't deserve these things to happen are happening. Chris Watts was really the eye-opener for me. I mean, I didn't really follow that story too much, but when I first saw him on the media, and you know, he was like, this guy looks really weird, what's going on with this? And when you found out more, you're like, this guy's guilty. But wow, surprising. So this story we've been following with Dylan Rounds, who lives in Lucin, Utah, only 19 years old, a farmer. Well, he has a dream to farm in this desert where it's quite salty. It's difficult to grow a crop, and actually had crop coming up. He was extremely excited about that, and now he has just disappeared in the middle of thin air, it seems. There was so much rumor and speculation that come out with this. It was really quite confusing trying to research this. So you had to be very careful. Even watching the parents' interviews, it was tough for me. So finally, we did weed out the majority of the junk. We know with this case, and if you want to know more details, watch the older videos, guys, that Dylan Rounds was a type of guy that was not much of a, he didn't seem to judge people at all. He made friends with everybody around him. He was dependable to look out for his neighbors, and he was very work-driven. He made most of his money as a custom farmer, meaning that he would use his physical body to work on other people's farms, or use his equipment or tools to help out on other farms. And where he lived in Lucin, Utah, you can see here, look, just nothing around. And 28 miles about away from Lucin is Montello, a very, very small town. And the big town place to hang out was the Cowboy Bar. It was also a cafe. One of his close friends was Kurt. The thing is what tipped Mom off into believing that Dylan was missing was the fact that they found boots behind, you can see the shed in this picture to the left of this picture, and it's quite a distance. It's about 300 yards away from that shed that they find this heel, and behind that heel was a pair of boots that belonged to Dylan Rounds. We hear there's a chance that they found other pieces of something that belonged to Dylan Well, at least the FBI did. And eventually, they were dealing with arresting this guy, Chase, and his Dylan Round's neighbor, which has been helping all of the farm on and off for a long time. It goes by Jim Brenner. Just recently, the police have said that this neighbor is actually now titled a suspect in this case, meaning they have some kind of evidence and they're working on putting it together and hopefully to find some answers for the family soon. But that wasn't the direction this case was going at first. In fact, people were pointing at a different group of people that it just really didn't make sense. So here's the thing about James Brenner, the neighbor who was squatting somehow in a trailer. He was once on Dylan's property where he was growing his crop, which I believe belongs to his grandfather. We're still trying to figure that one out. And he has a very sketchy history. He's been arrested. We know he's been arrested for having a possession of guns and ammo while being a felon, but though all these records are kind of popping up, they're not giving you a deep detail of what the heck is really going on in between all that. Some people are saying that this man might have had a violent past. But what exactly did he do to gain this title? At least not until the last few days. Candace Cooley says that she believes that Brenner has the answers she's looking for, especially when it comes to finding answers out about exactly what happened to her son Dylan Rounds. So here's the thing, Brenner has been arrested and he went to a detention hearing, and prosecutors say that he's a danger to the community and should not be let back out on the streets. In a news article, it said that he currently has an outstanding warrant from Box Elder County where he allegedly beat up a man using a lawn chair, guys. And he also served time for attempted murder. And police say he actually has a lengthy, long history of violence. This includes he had been at a shootout before and has a history of shooting at people. And despite that, he's also a convicted felon. A convicted felon who continues to somehow get his hands on firearms. And if it were him, which a lot of people believe it to be now, that they are seeing, a little bit more clear evidence coming out, which should have been in the first place, they would have created a lot less problems for people in Montello. So according to Jane Brenner's attorney, Tessa Hansen, she said that this attempted murder was in Maryland, and it was about, 30 years ago. So 30 years ago, he had an attempted murder. He tried to beat somebody with a chair violently. So, things are just really aren't looking good for James right now. Though, it's her job. James, his attorney tries to make it look like, hey, the murder charge was actually dropped to a malicious shooting. I think I forgot to mention the fact that she said that Mr. Brenner had 2 gun violations over the past 30 years. And in the same breath admits that she had no idea that James had an outstanding warrant in Box Elder County. And I bet that Candace is hearing this stuff. She's probably pretty much putting the 2 and 2 together the best she can and following that path right back to James Brenner. Because that hill where his boots were found is not that far from where Brenner was staying. In a recent news article, Candace, the missing Dylan Round's mother, was actually quoted saying, quote, "I think James did something to him," end quote. She also said that she thought that he snapped, especially the more that she listened to, the background of him in court. The good news is, finally, they did not allow James Brenner to get back out of the jail. He returned to his cell in Weber County, and his trial is set for September of this year. In a news article, it says that he will actually return to the state court Monday in Box Elder County, where he is facing more gun violations. The only thing we can hope for is that DH is going to be able to help Candace really find out everything she needs in order to push forward and finally get the justice she deserves. So it was the past Friday that Brenner appeared in this federal court on the firearms violation. He did plead not guilty, and it had nothing to do with the disappearance of Dylan. Let's backtrack just a little bit. So you're learning that this Jim guy that was hanging out with DH, he was actually squatting on this piece of land that Dylan was actually growing his crop on, or described as being adjacent to Dylan. According to the U.S. Attorney Carlos, I hope I say this right, Escada, he said that this guy had no right to be there. Yet, it seemed that Dylan and Don and several other people seemed to accept him just fine. He was actually helping Dylan on his farm quite often. According to several articles online, many investigators say that Brenner is 59 years old. They were able to pull up a little bit of background of his history with law enforcement, but really no one knows who this guy is. And what in the world happened the day that Dylan Rounds disappeared? What could have happened that might have caused whatever had happened between him and speculated Brenner that day? A lot of people are trying to figure out what was the motive in this disappearance of the 19-year-old Dylan Rounds anyways. Was it money? Was it a dispute? And why haven't we found him yet? Well, for me, I noticed that when they said that they found his boots by a burn pile behind a hill, which was just yards away from his shed, it really makes you wonder how many days they had in between the rain to dispose of some of these items. And does the wash come into play when it comes to some of these things, including 19-year-old Dylan missing? It's a horrible thought, to be honest. But a lot of people are not, they really don't have a lot of faith at this moment that he's most likely okay. Dylan, who has never gone missing, never, has been missing over a month now. Some people who follow the story believe that there's a chance that he was being held hostage in one of those underground bunkers or one of the hundreds of mine shafts that are in the area. This is the saddest part to this case, is not finding answers for Dylan's parents as to where Dylan is. And I wanted to mention that Marco Ortiz actually wrote an excellent article if you want to read up on who James Brenner is. According to Box Elder County Chief Deputy Cade Palmer, he said that volunteers and teams have actually logged over 300 plus hours, this was a few weeks back, and also covering more than 3,000 miles in the search for the missing 19-year-old expiring farmer, if I can speak, guys, Dylan Rounds. Detectives put in over 650 hours investigating this case. That's a lot of hours. And at this time, this is the same time that Candace Cooley is not happy with the work from the police. So it was a very difficult time for everybody during this. And the chief said, quote, "If I could summarize this search, it would be difficult and exhausting," end quote. The problem with the beginning of this case is police were having trouble finding evidence of a crime. Finally ended up having to call the FBI in and say, you know, the guy's not here where he's supposed to be. We know he's supposed to be here, even if they didn't find any evidence of the crime at the beginning of this case. But eventually it did come around to where it was titled a criminal investigation, relieving the mother of Dylan Rounds. For Candace Cooley and Justin Rounds, the father of Dylan, they have no doubt that there is foul play involved in their son's disappearance. And she was quoted in the article when they finally were deemed, suspicious, and they were able to take this case a little bit more seriously, said, quote, we might be a little behind the boat, but at least it's happening, end quote. It's at that point you could tell that she was very relieved that the FBI and everybody were listening to her and taking this case serious. You could tell that it took a lot of weight off her shoulders, in fact. A lot of people felt like she was trying to take over this investigation, but as soon as FBI hit and everything was taken seriously, she jumped back and said, let the professionals do their job. She is no longer going to try to, stick her nose into this case other than to try to find out what they learned. Must be extremely, incredibly hard as a parent to know your child's missing and there's just not much you can do to help them. But she is absolutely a little more relieved knowing that there are people working around the clock to find answers for her son's and where he could be. So I'll try to do more updates here and there on this case later. But right now, let's talk about a case that I've covered a long time ago on Kelsey Berreth. If you don't know this case, go back and check out my older videos. Learn more about this case, because if it is all about another mother who didn't give up and accept simple answers that her daughter just went missing on her own. Cheryl Berreth, the mother of the missing Kelsey Berreth, talked to her daughter on Thanksgiving of 2018, but she didn't hear from her again after that. She asked police to go out and do a welfare check, in which they did not get a response or see Kelsey Berreth. It wasn't long when Cheryl catches when that they couldn't even locate her, but her car is at the townhome she had bought in Woodland Park, Colorado. Kelsey had moved to the area to actually be close to a guy that she referred to at one point as her fiance, Patrick Frazee, also known as a local cowboy in some articles, who actually he lived with his mother on a pretty large ranch. So the two were not living together, which a lot of people thought were odd. And but they had a baby together, a beautiful little girl, when Kelsey disappeared Thanksgiving Day. It was her mother that didn't give up, that went to her townhome and found some evidence of foul play, and she pushed the police until finally they discovered something quite gruesome. There was loads of evidence in that townhome that something bad happened to Kelsey on Thanksgiving, and they followed the breadcrumbs and find out that Patrick Frazee had an old girlfriend and friend who had just been visiting him multiple times, her name being Crystal Lee Kinney, a nurse, rodeo queen, and mother, divorced mother as well. According to Crystal Lee Kinney later, she admitted to the fact that they had discussed on ways of getting rid of Kelsey Berreth. She even mentioned and suggested poisoning someone with her favorite coffee. Patrick Frazee supposedly suggested that maybe she was having some kind of drug problem or a mental breakdown. And he didn't lift a hand in trying to help Kelsey Berreth, and so that was an immediate red flag to anyone that followed this case. It was in October of 2018 that Frazee told Crystal Lee Kinney that he still needed the problem taken care of, claiming that Kelsey Berreth was allegedly abusing her daughter. And on multiple occasions, Patrick Frazee tried to get Crystal Lee Kinney to take Kelsey Berreth out, whether it be by using a pipe to hit her in the head with, poison her by coffee. But Crystal Lee Kinney says that she couldn't do it. She just couldn't. But here's the thing. Turns out Patrick Frazee convinces Kelsey Berreth Thanksgiving Day that he wanted to play a game of smell the candle, so you had to guess the scent, I guess. He blindfolds her and then beats her to the pulp till she's no longer here. At that point, he calls Crystal Lee Kinney, who is in another state, and tells her that she has a mess to clean up. Here's what is very sketchy about Crystal. She puts together this cleanup kit, heads to Colorado, and cleans this mess up. After they clean up the mess, she sees Patrick Frazee carry out a black tote bag. It's speculated that was probably Kelsey Barrett. And I'm skipping some very intriguing details. You guys need to go check out the older videos. She sees him set this tote bag on fire on his ranch. This is as sick as it can get, guys. Now, here's the thing. Eventually, the FBI investigators start getting pretty hot on their trail, and so they go to Crystal Lee Kinney. She eventually strikes a deal and starts talking. And prosecutors have mentioned this as the deal with the devil. So they go to trial. Patrick Frazee, while behind bars, is still threatening to take people's lives. They actually have an inmate turn in a letter, and Crystal Lee Kinney agrees to testify for the prosecutor. So you're not going to believe what this deal was. Kinney would testify in the Kelsey Barrett Patrick Frazee trial. Then she would face her own punishment, which ended up being only 3 years served for such a horrific thing. And so it was in 2021 that the Colorado court, there was an appeal later, threw out Crystal Lee Kinney's original 3-year sentence for felony tampering with evidence in the case. In a news article, it said that the higher court found that Teller County District Court Judge Scott Sales exceeded the maximum sentence allowed by her plea agreement, improperly relying on outside facts to push her prison time into the aggravated range for the crime. Quite sad to hear, really. So we're already thinking she's not getting enough time already for her role in this, because when people believe that she's still lying, though she is coming forth and testifying against Patrick Frazee. So Crystal Lee Kinney actually gets re-sentenced to 18 months in prison with the same start date as her original sentence. And that start date being, I believe in records, it says January 28th of 2020. In fact, guys, they're saying it's not uncommon for inmates to be released early, which we all know this. So the Colorado revised statutes dictate that inmates sentenced for a Class 6 felony, like Crystal Lee Kinney, are eligible for parole after serving at least 50% of their time. They also have to, include a few other factors. So once they've done all this, this is what happened. They said, quote, "Based on the new sentence, Miss Kinney is now past her mandatory release date, and she was released from the Denver Women's Correctional Facility on parole on Tuesday. The Department of Corrections does not decide how much time an individual serves in prison. The department follows the sentence that the court issues and calculates the time based on the relevant state statutes," end quote. And in no time at all, somebody that plotted, cleaned, and chickened out of taking someone else's life, a mother, is now assigned to a parole division and is released from jail. At the time, Kinney had been involved with this case, and it was hitting its hottest point. She was around 34 years of age. But I can tell you right now, there is a lot of evidence that we were not giving that I would love to have the time to go through, and I'm sure it's available now, of getting her GPS information and actually knowing how many times she made that trip from the state she was living in to the state Patrick Frazee and Kelsey Barrett lived in, Colorado, And it will give you an idea of how many times she attempted to go through with something so dark and heinous, evil, but says she didn't have the courage to do so. Now, I'm probably stuttering all over the place on this case because I'm kind of going off of memory here and a few articles. And I don't do retakes unless I absolutely have to. But it's just insane, guys, as we follow this case. Kelsey Berreth, her remains have never been recovered. We know that Cheryl Berreth, the mother of Kelsey, is raising Kelsey's beautiful daughter. She was just over a year old when all this, finally closed out. And now she must be about 4 or 5, so she's starting school. It's very, very sad. So a lot of people are like, what was the motive in this? So they're claiming that they never discovered the motive, but to me, the motive was Patrick Frazee wanted custody of his daughter. I think he knew that Kelsey Berreth was getting tired and fed up with whatever he did to her. And if not that, she knew that he was getting tired. Either or, they were separating, and he wanted to keep custody of his daughter. So what was insane about him is him making death threats and trying to hire people to do things to people, including Cheryl Berreth, while he is behind bars. He was actually in court when some of this is happening. And Crystal Lee Kinney is now on his hit list. I don't think I've ever seen a man full of so much hate in my entire life as I have with Patrick Frazee. He's determined that, a lot like Lori Vallow, if you follow that case, if you cross them, you are going to pay at any means possible. But I just think it's sickening to know that Crystal Lee Kinney, the culprit, conspirator, in my opinion, is now walking free on the streets. So many of the media sources that cover this try to paint her as a victim of his manipulation. No. It went on too long. She even discussed it with attorneys and friends, and it was just incredibly disappointing to know how long this went on. She started talking. In fact, she didn't even talk until she knew her rear end was on the line. Guys, this is a nurse. So you have to wonder, is she practicing her career somewhere? Because that would be scary. Anyways, this isn't a super great update on Crystal Lee Kinney, but it was a little bit I wanted to kind of start covering because we may go back over this later. Man, I just cannot believe that she's just out there walking free right now. I want to send my love out to Cheryl Berreth. She was extremely nice to me when I was covering videos. Always positive. Please, stay strong. And you got a lot of, support and love going out to you, even though you don't hear much about it anymore. Check out these missing faces, people. We still have cases out there unsolved and basically just frozen solid. They're not moving forward. Worst of all is the children that are out there that we don't have any answers for. We have Monkey. He still continues to be missing. Dulce. Summer Wells. So many more. Thanks, guys, for your support and for caring. Love you guys, and I'll see you guys soon.